Welcome to This Explainer. Let's jump right in. We're looking at a classic story today, set deep in an American forest. Now, on the surface, sure, it might just sound like a simple fairy tale. But today, we're going to peel back the layers. What we're actually looking at is a tense, high-stakes psychological showdown. It's raw desperation going head-to-head with calm, calculated strategy. It is honestly an incredible look at conflict resolution and strategic thinking, all wrapped up in a brief encounter between two very different animals. Okay, so let's set the stage with a really fundamental question. What happens when brute force meets sharp wit? It's a question about how we handle conflict. How do we use leverage? How do we spot hidden dangers when the odds are just totally physically stacked against us? When you are backed into a corner, how do you survive? Well, the source material we're digging into today gives us a front row seat to exactly this kind of collision. So our story kicks off in a deep forest. We've got this wolf, and he is hungry. He's been searching for food literally all day long. And I don't mean just a quick afternoon stroll. We're talking about an exhausting, totally fruitless search where he's come up with absolutely zero. This establishes our baseline, right? Extreme desperation. The guy is running on empty, operating purely on survival mode. And that level of desperation makes him incredibly dangerous. But as we're about to see, it also makes him highly, highly vulnerable. And the contrast here perfectly illustrates the dynamic between our two main characters. On one side, we have the desperate, exhausted wolf. He's growling, he's running on fumes, and he practically collides with the clever fox. Now the fox, she's completely calm. She's just casually carrying a basket of berries, totally in her element. The tension is absolutely palpable. You've got this highly emotional, starved predator coming face to face with a rational, well-supplied traveler. Instantly, the stakes shoot up to a life or death scenario. The wolf stops the fox dead in her tracks and growls this terrifying ultimatum. Give me your food or I'll eat you instead. Boom. Classic brute force negotiation. He's not offering a trade. He's not looking for a win-win compromise. He is using pure intimidation and the threat of ultimate physical violence to get exactly what he wants. In his head, his massive size and his massive hunger completely dictate the rules of the game here. Now, put yourself in those shoes. Most creatures would instantly panic, drop the basket, and run for the hills, or just freeze completely in terror. But here is where it gets absolutely fascinating. Instead of freezing, the fox, she just smiles, and she pulls off this brilliant psychological redirection. She says, "Why eat me? I know a place with food enough for both of us," right? She doesn't fight his force with force. She doesn't even tell him no. She completely reframes the whole situation. She validates his underlying need, which is obviously that he's starving, but she instantly removes herself as the target. She literally takes the wolf's own greed and uses it as a lever against him. And just look at how fast that redirection works. The wolf's eyes practically light up, and he immediately drops that aggressive, dominant posture. Why? Because his impulsive greed totally blinds him to the obvious danger of this sudden, way too good to be true offer. I mean, he just stops thinking like a calculating predator and immediately starts thinking like a guy at an all-you-can-eat buffet. The fox has totally hijacked his decision-making process just by dangling this irresistible shortcut right in front of him. Watch how masterful this is. She executes her trap step by step, totally manipulating this greedy wolf into making a disastrous call. Step 1, she leads him away from the familiar forest and over to an old farm. Step 2, she points right at a wooden shed. And then, the absolute masterful final hook. She leans in and whispers, "Inside there's more food than you can imagine." Wow, that is textbook manipulation. Notice she doesn't physically push him inside. She doesn't have to. She just sets the stage, paints this vivid picture of an absolute feast, and lets his own unchecked appetite do the rest of the heavy lifting. And the result? Explosive and immediate. Completely driven by his ravenous appetite, the gritty wolf just rushes blindly inside the structure, and then, bang! The door slams shut right behind him. In literally a fraction of a second, the entire power dynamic flips. The apex predator who thought he was strolling into an effortless all-you-can-eat feast has sprinted headfirst into his own downfall. His total lack of critical thinking was his ultimate undoing. Because as you probably guessed, this was not a pantry. The text tells us explicitly that this wooden shed was actually a structure built by the local farmer specifically to act as an animal trap, right? The wolf realizes, way too late that this shed was never a feast waiting to happen. It was a deliberate, calculated mechanism designed to capture woodland creatures. The clever fox knew this environment like the back of her hand, and she completely weaponized that local knowledge against the wolf's blind ignorance. And here is the ultimate irony of the whole shebang. Stripped of all his brute force, completely neutralized by 4 wooden walls, the desperate wolf suddenly shouts out, "Fox, help me!" Just think about the massive psychological shift there. Literally 2 minutes ago, he was threatening to violently end her life. Now, he is begging for her assistance. It is a perfect textbook example of how quickly physical dominance can just evaporate when it gets outmaneuvered by a superior strategy. So, does the fox help him? Nope. Instead, she just laughs softly and drops this incredibly piercing piece of strategic wisdom. Greed and force don't bring success. Smart choices do. She isn't just surviving this encounter anymore. She is literally teaching a masterclass. She's articulating exactly why she is out there, free, calmly walking away with her basket of berries, while he is locked inside a literal cage. Her sharp intellect completely, undeniably outmatched his sheer physical strength. The fallout for the wolf is pretty strict. For the first hour, he just stays trapped in the shed, forced to sit there and stew in his own massive mistake. By hour 12, the farmer finally discovers him, and by hour 24, he's transported and released far, far away from his home forest. So the narrative wraps up with a very real consequence. He isn't physically harmed, but his whole life is uprooted. And the text notes that from that day forward, the wolf finally learned to think before acting. The pain of the consequence basically forced a total behavioral reboot. So, distilling this whole encounter down, we really find 3 core takeaways from the source material. First up, intelligence consistently beats physical strength. The wolf had all the initial physical power, sure, but the fox had the strategy. Second, unchecked greed creates its own problems. The wolf's hunger literally locked the door of his own cage because it totally blinded him to the obvious red flags. And third, thinking before acting is an absolute, non-negotiable requirement for long-term success. As we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with something to really chew on. In your own life, are you using force, like the wolf, or are you making smart choices, like the fox? Take a second to reflect on the challenges you face every day. Ask yourself, could your own impulsive desires or maybe aggressive, pushy tactics actually be blinding you to hidden traps right in front of you? Are you just instantly reacting to your hunger, whatever that may be, or are you strategically planning for your success? It's a super powerful thought to keep in mind the next time you run into an intimidating obstacle. Thanks so much for exploring this with me today, and remember, always think a few steps ahead.